Should we lean towards the route of, I don't know if the news was today or it was yesterday. It's been a hell of a busy day, but this just came to my attention. I thought it was just crazy because I almost watch this man's podcast every single day. That's JJ Redick, and it took me by surprise because what coaching pedigree does JJ Redick have as a coach? Like, he could be a hell of a coach, but like, I thought this was fake when I saw it.
Coaches his son's team.
Bro, I could not. He coaches his son's team? Yeah. I could not believe it, man. Like,
yeah, he's like 8-year-old son's team. That's the only thing he coaches.
Yeah, like, it's crazy. He might be a great veteran in the league, and maybe that's all they need for a coach. But like, Nick Nurse to be fired, and then they're looking at the route of potentially hiring JJ Redick. Like, this man, I love him. I love JJ Redick. His dark humor, or his dry humor, I should say. It's hilarious. Like, I could just imagine JJ in a timeout being like, "Hey, listen, pal, OG, you gotta swing the ball to Freddie, man. Freddie's open for the shot. What the are you doing?" Like, he gives me that energy. But yeah, I really don't know how the fit would work with JJ in Toronto. With a 3-point specialist, obviously a small guard like Freddie. Will he come back? We don't know. Maybe JJ could try, I guess, if he was the coach, recruit him back to Toronto and say, "I want you as my starting point guard. This is how we're going to run the offense almost through you. Or you're going to be a pivotal part of this Raptors team, and we want to compete for championships for years to come, and we want you a part of that." Maybe they're looking at that route, but yeah, there's many questions to be answered here. How can a guy like JJ Redick come in and coach the Raptors if he is to, and utilize Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, OG in a system where, I mean, obviously we'd assume it would be a 3-point philosophy, just based off how JJ Redick basketball mind kind of works. So, and also, how will his role in the media change? Like, because I don't know about you, but I want to continue to watch the JJ Redick podcast, and if he's coaching, I don't think he can do that, which that'll suck. So personally, I don't want JJ Redick to coach. I want him to stick to the podcasting game, as controversial as that sounds. But yeah, what did you think about this?
I'm torn on this because I really love JJ Redick.
Yeah.
And I think he would make an excellent coach, personally speaking. I just don't want to see a situation the likes of Steve Nash, where he's thrown in to that situation because a guy like KD and Kyrie both said they wanted him as the coach. They fire Kenny Atkinson, and then Steve Nash gets thrown to the Wolves pretty much, and he loses control over those guys because, you know, he doesn't have that coaching experience, or yes, he's got the respectability as a player. Obviously, he's won 2 MVPs and, you know, has a tremendous basketball resume and pedigree, but he doesn't have any coaching experience to fall back on. So that's how he doesn't have that ability to keep the group aligned. And I'm worried that might happen with JJ Redick.
Yeah.
Mind you, they might be 2 different personalities. For what I can see, JJ's a bit more of like he'll put you in your place when you need to, but he's still like a great guy to sort of help build these young guys up. And I think he's understanding, because you could see even in the arguments that he makes on First Take or when he's talking on his pod, he's very, he'll be very understanding, and he'll also be very
passive, aggressive,
analytical about it, and he'll only provide pure facts and stats, you know what I mean, to back up what he's saying. He'll never just say something for the sake of it. And I think that'll be the same when he addresses stuff to his players. He's not going to just attack a player for a specific reason if he doesn't have something to back that up on, you know what I mean? And I think players will respect him for that, the fact that he's been a veteran in this league for a very long time. I think because he spent a lot of the time as a role player, he sort of understands the nuances, because, you know, you are a bit more, how do I say it, you're more of a perfectionist. You really want to perfect your craft. And the stories of what I've heard of him, you know, he had that same routine every single game day. He was very diligent with all that preparation and putting up shots. And I think the same would come with his coaching, when he would be watching vision, you know, breaking down a scouting report for a specific matchup, you know, showing footage to his players to obviously know what to expect from a specific opponent. Even when you watch him on his podcasts, and when him and Tim Legler talk together, whenever Tim Legler's on the show, they're just, the way that they describe certain plays, and he's got such a high basketball IQ, and I think it would be a really good fit for them, to be honest. Despite all I've already said about Steve Nash and him being thrown to the wolves. But one last point I want to make with this is, I think that you saw that even with the camaraderie that he had with Trey Murphy on the podcast, how they were like bantering, and you know, they had that, you know, they were talking shit to one another pretty much, even though it was in like a friendly manner. I think he's got that kind of relationship that he can have with players, but again, he's got that serious and stern side that, you know, he can put people in their place when they need to be put in their place. And I don't think it necessarily be a bad move, but again, because you look at a guy like Eric Spoelstra, for example, was a video coordinator for the Miami Heat, and then Pat Riley promoted him to a head coaching role. Mind you, he obviously had experience within the organization, and he was doing obviously scouting, etc. But JJ Redick's doing no different in the media, and also through his commentating and having that podcast. He's basically doing the same thing. He's breaking down the game of basketball. So if he's got that knowledge and understanding of the game to a really high level and high degree, if Eric Spoelstra can do it, there's no reason why JJ Redick can't. So that's me personally speaking. I think you see that guys who had less success as players in terms of like accolades, and they weren't star players, they tend to be the guys that succeed as coaches, whether they were a lesser player that never made the NBA, or a guy that was maybe just a role player because they understood the finer details of the game and how to really perfect your strengths and turn your strengths into, I guess, a positive for the team.
Just like touching base off the points you kind of brought up about JJ Redick almost being able to connect with guys like Trey Murphy and young players, you know, veterans in the league. I think that's really important. And one thing to kind of mention off that is JJ Redick's, like, throughout his career or journey, I guess his basketball journey, he's been the man at Duke University, killed it there, superstar, megastar over there, came to the NBA, had to find a role for the Orlando Magic, and he found that role coming off the bench as a three-point shooter. Then he went to the Clippers. We know what he did there. He killed it. Probably his peak, I guess, basketball was over there. And then to Philly. And then ending his career as a veteran who might not have even been worth playing on the court. Maybe not to that extent, but look, his days at Dallas and that last year in New Orleans looked really difficult. So he can kind of relate to all these players on a level where it's like, no matter if you're the star, you're the sixth man, you have no role yet, I think or you're the man, which he was at Duke, I think he can definitely connect with all these guys. And maybe at some point in his career, I mean, he would have had guys like Stan Van Gundy, who I've heard wasn't the best. He was a great coach, don't get me wrong, but I heard he wasn't the best players coach. And maybe JJ is a guy on that team who brought everybody together, like Gilbert Arenas and Dwight Howard, all these guys. So it's always the not the biggest names like you said, but the guy in the locker room that just makes things go like that. And I mean, you would assume JJ Redick's that guy. So for that reason, heck, maybe JJ Redick would be a great coach in the league. It just took me by surprise though.
No, definitely, you know, especially because he's established himself in the media now, and obviously he's sort of found his niche and his, I guess, calling, which was being a really good analyst. And obviously that podcast is one of the best basketball podcasts out and about at the moment. The Old Man and the Three, shout out.
Shout out Tommy Alter.
But yeah, that's it, Tommy Alter, the unheralded bloke on the pod. He's a legend. But yeah, just like I said, with the way the coaching situations are brought into the NBA now, I think, yes, you got guys with experience who have had head coaching experience in the past, but I feel like maybe sometimes it is good to have that fresh perspective or fresh outlook on things, like a guy such as JJ Redick would bring, because you get a lot of these guys that recycle. For example, the Hornets, they sacked James Borrego, and brought back a guy who they already sacked previously in Steve Clifford. It's like that to me doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And there's other situations you've seen in the past in the NBA that's like happened a lot too in that sense. But I think there is some guys out there you'd feel hard done by if you were a coach and you weren't getting a look in, like Mark Jackson, for example. We've mentioned him before on a couple of episodes with the Houston Rockets, where you mentioned you'd like to see him coach that Rockets team. A guy like that would be good for the Raptors. He saw what he did with the Warriors and helped Steph and Clay develop into the players they are today, and pretty much was the guy that helped set the tone for that whole dynasty. But I think, like I said, some teams prefer that fresh perspective. You look at the NFL, Sean McVay with the Rams, he was a young coach, he came in, Mike McDaniel. It's happening in the NFL as well, a lot of young guys. Obviously, they've paid their dues at other teams, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if a young guy comes in, but you just have to make sure that he's respected, and we don't want to see situations like Steve Nash happen, like I mentioned. So it's just, you got to find that, I guess, level playing field from both ends, and just find the even ground where it's like you're not going for inexperience, but also you're not going for a situation where it might just be a recycled coach like Steve Clifford. So we'll just watch this space, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I think, to your point, I think it's a great, I guess, bringing in, maybe coaching philosophy is outdated. Obviously, the game's changing. A lot more threes are being put up. And there's not many guys who've kind of played in the NBA and actually lived that adjustment. And JJ Redick's one of them. He's played in the early 2010s, and he's played in the modern era, and obviously the game's changed a great amount. And I think JJ Redick, being a part of that Clippers team, that was probably one of the first teams to do it, who they took a lot of threes. So yeah, maybe the Raptors, maybe this is the coach they need, but I guess we'll find out. If he gets hired though, I think it's going to be sick and definitely unexpected. Nobody would have thought